Major Taylor writes home. Letters to Worcester, 1897.
The American Antiquarian Society, also known as AAS, recently acquired some letters written by superstar bicyclist Marshall Major Taylor, also known as the Worcester Whirlwind. The existence of these letters from the 19th century was unknown to researchers until 2020. A Worcester area resident found them in storage and donated the letters to the AAS, a national research library in Worcester. To help explain the significance of these letters, the American Antiquarian Society turned to the Major Taylor Association, a Worcester-based nonprofit organization dedicated to remembering the life and furthering the legacy of the 1899 World Cycling Champion. Lynn Tolman, president of the Major Taylor Association, conducted research and provided the following historical interpretation.
The letters were sent in summer and fall 1897 from Providence, Rhode Island, Springfield, Massachusetts, Cleveland, Ohio, Buffalo, New York, and Indianapolis, Indiana, which was Major Taylor's birthplace and where he had lived until he was almost 17. The letters reveal details about Major Taylor's home life in Worcester and allude to difficulties he faced as the only African-American racer competing on the pro cycling circuit during the Jim Crow era. The first letter in the set from Providence is postmarked July 25th, 1897.
Dear Ben, just a word to say hello. I won 2 races here yesterday. I have your bars ready now and will send them to you as soon as I return to Boston. Goodbye, Mage. P.S. Going to Newport today. Love to all.
In addition to reporting his race results and talking about bike equipment, like that set of handlebars, Major Taylor in these letters entrusts Ben Walker with errands such as sending Taylor his suit and holding on to some of his prize money. Who exactly was Benjamin Walker?
Benjamin Walker was a charter member of the Albion Cycle Club, founded in 1895 in Worcester by and for black bicycle riders. That was the year that Major Taylor moved east from Indianapolis with his employer and mentor, Louis Bertie Munger, who established a bike factory in Worcester. Munger was attracted to Worcester as a manufacturing hub and also hoped the racial climate would be better for his young black protege. Taylor joined the Albions, it cost $5, and was the club's up-and-coming star, although he wasn't permanently settled in Worcester yet. In 1896, Taylor stayed for a time in Middletown, Connecticut, where Munger had another bike factory, and in Brooklyn, New York, where he trained with the South Brooklyn Wheelmen prior to his professional debut that December in a 6-day race at Madison Square Garden. For part of 1897, Major Taylor stayed in Cambridge and trained with other riders for a Boston versus Philadelphia pursuit race in July. He tried out for the 5-man Boston team and made the cut. This was one of the earliest racially integrated teams in professional sports. Major Taylor visited Worcester after the 6-day race in New York, and the Albion Cycle Club honored him at a banquet. He stayed with Ben Walker, one of the club's officers. Walker was an upholsterer and carpet installer about 13 years older than Taylor. Walker lived with his wife and children at 13 Parker Street in Worcester's Beaverbrook neighborhood. That part of the city had become home to many African Americans who migrated from the South. The living arrangement with the Walkers solidified, and Major Taylor wrote down 13 Parker Street as his home address in his pocket diaries for 1897, 1898, and 1899. These little black books were where he kept track of his travels and expenses. In the 1898 diary, B.F. Walker is listed as Taylor's emergency contact at the same address, 13 Parker Street.
Along with the letters from Major Taylor is an invoice that reads, "Engraving on Major Taylor Trophy." The invoice was for $2 and written out to the Albion Cycle Club. The order for the inscription was placed on June 1st, 1896.
The trophy was a silver cup that was Major Taylor's prize for winning the Albion Club's 2nd annual road race in Worcester on May 16, 1896. After that, the Albion riders were colloquially known as the Major Taylors. Their roster for the Telegram Road Race in 1898 included Benjamin Walker. By then, Major Taylor himself was on to bigger things. How these letters surfaced is a story in itself. Constance Whitehead Hanks is the person who donated them to the American Antiquarian Society. Hanks's grandfather, Ernest Parker Whitehead, had trucking companies, wrecking, construction, and architectural companies in Worcester, and he also appraised buildings for fire insurance. His father, an immigrant from England, had started the business, E. Whitehead Incorporated, which developed about 90 acres on Salisbury Street in Worcester. The third generation, Hanks's father, Richard D. Whitehead, liquidated the business in 1974, but saved boxes full of things that had been salvaged from buildings that the Whiteheads cleared out. The boxes went from their warehouse in Webster Square in Worcester to the Whiteheads' home in Auburn, and Connie Hanks began going through them after her parents died. When she first read the letters, signed Mage and Major, she didn't know who that was. But after she noticed the name Taylor on one of the papers and recalled driving on Major Taylor Boulevard in Worcester, she looked up Major Taylor and put it together. That's when she realized that these letters came from the famous black cyclist who was trying to outrun racism and indeed reached his goal of being the fastest bicycle rider in the world. That's the title of his autobiography. Major Taylor set numerous speed records, became the world sprint champion in 1899, and was the first African-American athlete to become an international superstar. He was a rock star. Hanks told me that before that light bulb went on for her, she had assumed that Major Taylor Boulevard was named for just some military person. In the cyclist case, Major was a nickname, not a rank. His real name was Marshall.
Given Major Taylor's importance as an African-American trailblazer from Worcester, the American Antiquarian Society was pleased that these documents had survived since the 1890s. AAS felt a strong obligation to make them available to researchers who could help put them into historical context.
Springfield, September 14th, 1897. Dear Ben, this leaves me feeling all right with the exception of a slight cold. I am riding very fast and I qualified in all my heats but one yesterday, 4 out of 5. Today, if I can only do so well, I can talk turkey some, for I certainly did beat out Ball twice yesterday for fair. But those were only heats and don't count for much. It's the final, you know. I am sending you a paper also, you can see for yourself. Enclosed you will also please find $40, which please lay up on the shelf for me with the rest. I am riding hard every day, and I don't care to be worrying about anything more than really is necessary.
Taylor was racking up successes on the national circuit. He was focused on vanquishing the reigning national sprint champion, Eddie Bald. He was nicknamed Cannonballed.
Major Taylor biographer Andrew Ritchie wrote that the rivalry between Taylor and Bald was one of the hottest attractions of the season. The crowds loved Taylor and his tremendous burst of speed, but they were still shocked at the uniqueness of a black athlete going head-to-head with white men at a time of strict segregation. As Ritchie put it, the struggle between Taylor and his white rivals was full of an unstated but obvious racial symbolism. Ritchie wrote that there was no suggestion that Bald himself had any racist animosity towards Taylor, but that many of the white riders, especially the ones that Taylor kept defeating, had a hard time accepting his presence.
Most of them were furious at being beaten by a man they regarded as their social inferior. And as the competition for the sprint rankings heated up, some began to react with physical hostility. This was late August, early September. For example, on August 31st in a race in Worcester, Taylor was crowded into the fence and he crashed and was badly bruised. He lodged a protest against a rider named C.S. Wells for foul riding, and Wells was disqualified from any of the other races. But the referees didn't always side with Taylor. At a meet in New Jersey, other riders threatened Taylor after he won a race, and he wanted to withdraw from the next race. His trainer told a newspaper reporter that the white riders were threatening to take the major's life if he went out again, and he was scared pale. The referee demanded evidence, and in the end, Taylor rode in the next race, but he hung back and didn't try to win. After the Worcester crash, the New York Sun called for an investigation, and Taylor himself told reporters that he felt he was in mortal danger. He was quoted September 20th in the Worcester Telegram.
I have a dread of injury every time I start in a race with the men who have been on the circuit this year. They have threatened to injure me, and expect that before the season is finished, they will do so.
The hostility climaxed on September 23rd at a meet in Taunton, Massachusetts, after Taylor outsprinted William Becker of Minneapolis for the second place in the final of the 1 mile event. Becker came up behind Taylor, hurled him off his bike, threw him to the ground, and choked him into unconsciousness. Taylor was out cold for about 15 minutes. The police had to intervene and restrain Becker.
So the physical danger was very real. Already it was more than a threat. Taylor had been the victim of violence more than once on the racetracks, and yet he kept putting himself out there. The choking in Taunton was on Thursday, and he got on a train to Cleveland on Thursday night or early Friday, and he raced on Saturday. To me, that makes Major Taylor's letter that Sunday morning from Cleveland stand out. Think of the courage it took for him just to get on the track in Cleveland.
Sunday, 8:45 a.m., September 26. Dear Ben, I arrived here Saturday morning at 1:20. I was about 6 hours late owing to a freight train wreck on the road, which we had to wait until it was cleared off the track so we could pass. However, I raced in the afternoon and started in 3 events and won 2 of them. Also won all of my heats. I created a big sensation here among the colored population by winning out yesterday, and among the whites as well. I shall leave here tonight on the boat for Buffalo, where I shall race on Tuesday. I shall not go to Trenton as I expected to do, as the jump I think would be too much for me to make a good showing. I made $150 out of this trip, and I will send you $100 of it by first mail in the morning. I guess I will go to Detroit from Buffalo, but I don't remember the date. I'm feeling much better now than expected after the fall I had. Well, I will not say much just now, as I haven't had any breakfast yet, and of course you know what that means. I don't want no fooling. If my suit comes, take out the sweater and send the suit to me at Buffalo in care of the Buffalo Athletic Field, and I will get it all right. Goodbye. Love to all. Mage.
In his letter, Major Taylor seems most pleased at what his winning in Cleveland meant to black people there. There were about 2,000 spectators at the Cleveland races, hosted by the Quill Club. A cycling publication called Bearings said the spectators included no more than 50 colored people. Bearings reported that Major Taylor was the bright particular star of the meet and got a storm of applause when he appeared on the track. He won a 1-mile race and a 2-mile race. Different newspapers used variations of a Wire report that said Taylor would have won all 3 of his events were it not for a blunder in starting. Bearings explained that the race started in the twilight and most of the racers were caught unaware when the starting gun went off, and Taylor lost at least 10 seconds there. The Atlanta Constitution ran just 2 sentences of the story and added a parenthetical note at the Quill Club white races. Taylor raced in Cleveland and wrote home about it before the punishment for the Taunton choking was meted out. Over that weekend, there was speculation in the press that the assailant would be suspended from racing for a long time or even permanently. But in the end, Becker was fined a paltry $50. Other white riders were glad to chip in to pay it. The payment was made on Monday at a meet in Trenton, New Jersey that Taylor decided over the weekend not to attend. With that, Becker's suspension was lifted after just 3 days. Taylor took a ferry across Lake Erie on Sunday night from Cleveland and was in Buffalo, a day ahead of Tuesday's racing there, by the time he learned of Becker's reinstatement. His letter from Buffalo was postmarked Monday, September 27th.
Dear Ben, enclosed you will please find the sum of $50. Please put it away for me in case I may need a little ready money. Did you get my last letter in the paper? It is time for me to go to the track and train. I race here tomorrow. Didn't go to Trenton, the jump was too much. Love to all and kiss the baby for me. Send mail to me at 4938 Dearborn Street, Chicago. I will be there on the 29th or the 30th. Goodbye, as ever, Major.
So that was Monday. Writing home on Sunday morning, before the $50 penalty was announced, Taylor chose his words carefully. He wrote to Walker that he felt better than expected after the fall I had, and went on to say, in essence, to not get him started on that topic. To me, fall seems like a mild word for the way he was hurled to the ground in Taunton and then choked, or the way the August 31st crash in Worcester happened. The Worcester incident was deemed a foul, in other words, not purely an accident, and in Taunton it was an outright assault. I think Taylor knew that everyone at Taunton had seen what happened and that he was already getting sympathy in the press, so he didn't want or need to express indignation, even in a private letter. He may have figured that complaining or lashing out could be interpreted as whining or protesting too much and could turn the officials against him. Keeping tight-lipped also reflected Taylor's general demeanor of not expressing anger or resentment, of just letting his legs do the talking. The famous quote from his autobiography, published about 30 years later, is, "Life is too short for a man to hold bitterness in his heart." Given the racial climate, declining to speak out plainly against injustice was also a political choice and a survival tactic. To be seen as uppity would only heighten the danger.
Indianapolis, November 1st. Dear Ben, I hope you will pardon me for not answering your letter before this. I've been pretty busy for the past few days, and then I expected to start Friday, but I had to straighten up a little business just at the last moment. I'm going to stop over at Cleveland, Ohio for a few days, and I'll be home by Saturday, sure, if not before. It is very rainy and bad here just now. I was at church most all day yesterday. Say, Ben, I just received another letter from the factory saying that they had not got the tandem yet. I'm very much worried about it, but maybe I can find it when I come. Well, I don't know what to say, or rather, I don't care to write too much, or I won't have much to talk about when I do get back. You tell the boys that they had better begin to walk mighty straight, and you can kiss the baby for me. Well, Ben, please excuse the short letter, and look for me this week for sure. Tell Annie I'll write her when I get to Cleveland. Again, hoping to see you all and the folks on Saturday. I beg to remain your sincere friend, Major.
In Indianapolis, Major Taylor may have stayed with family or friends. The letter is not on hotel stationery like the others. We know from Taylor's pocket diaries that the Chicago address he gave for where he could be reached at the end of September belonged to his sister Gertrude. His father also had moved to Chicago for a time. "Kiss the baby for me" in the Buffalo and Indianapolis letters apparently is a reference to the Walkers' youngest child at that time, Alice, who was born in February 1897. "Tell Annie" may be referring to Ben Walker's wife, Annie, and "tell the boys" likely refers to the Walkers' other children at that time, Richard, who was 7 years old, Albert, 6, and Raymond, 4. By the time of the 1900 census, the Walkers had moved around the corner from Parker Street onto Mason Court. Raymond isn't listed in that census because he died at age 5 in February 1898. A few months later, the Walkers had another baby girl, Beryl, and another son, Benjamin, was born in 1901. Major Taylor wrote in the Indianapolis letter that he was at church most all day Sunday. This is consistent with a promise he had made to his mother before she died earlier that year to live an upright Christian life. His religious faith definitely shaped his identity and impacted his career. He was a steadfast member of the John Street Baptist Church in Worcester, and for many years he refused to race on Sundays, turning down lucrative offers to race in Europe, where Sunday racing was customary, until he was able, by virtue of his superstar status, to negotiate the provision "no racing on Sundays" in his contract for Europe in 1901. In the same letter, Taylor says he has been occupied with business. It was a fraught time for Bertie Munger's enterprise, the Worcester Cycle Manufacturing Company. The company had gone into receivership that summer, victim of a shakeout in the bike industry. As for racing, Taylor by then was out of the running for the national championship. After the Cleveland meet in September, Taylor and other racers had embarked on a southern extension for the final third of the national circuit. But in town after town, including Indianapolis and New Albany, Indiana, Louisville, Kentucky, and St. Louis, Taylor was shut out of competition. Either racist promoters refused his entry, or the white riders refused to race against him. In mid-October, discouraged at his chances in this country, Taylor quit the circuit and headed home, telling reporters he would go to France at once, although he didn't go to Europe until 1901. Ultimately, Eddie Bald was declared the national champion again.
In his biography of Major Taylor, Andrew Ritchie says that despite the racism from white riders, 1897 was a remarkably successful season for Major Taylor. He beat Bald in several races and pushed him into tight finishes in others. In most of his races, with the highest-ranked professionals, he finished in the top 4. He won thousands of dollars and became a fan favorite and found managers and promoters eager to back him.
His career trajectory bore that out, with numerous speed records in 1898, the world title in 1899, and successful tours in Europe and Australia. The letters Major Taylor wrote home during his first pro season of bike racing give us a glimpse of his ambition and his focus and the making of a champion.